Spyro the Dragon is a game that I always see in demand by the YouTube public to be covered by figures that they've been watching for years, but most of the time it falls to the wayside in the shadow of other projects, so why don't I take a low-budget little stab at it? God, what is my life? I also find it really sad that the legacy of this game series is now just a disgusting shadow of its former self, and I get- oh, shadow of its former, cause that one game. Okay, yeah, I wasn't even going for that. Spyro the Dragon, the first one, for the PSX. Whatever you kids are calling that system. I don't know. Back in my day, it was just called a PlayStation. I got really bad arthritis from playing too much Spyro the Dragon. Spyro the Dragon was released on the original PlayStation in 1998. This game looks awesome. All of the animations are so fluid and emotional. The lighting effects, they're really good, and mostly, the everything visual is great. Character animations are all comically emotive, and I think that's really one of my favorite things about the visuals overall. The game also has full voice acting sequences between Spyro and the dragons he saves, not to mention a few cutscenes. The talent list is small but effective, as a world of 80 dragons and hundreds of other creatures is comprised of just Mr. Krabs, whatever Tassadar is, sorry not a huge StarCraft fan, Colonel Victor Hoffman, and Fake Crash. And to take the lead role as Spyro the Dragon is James Garcia from Reno 911. Yeah. The music, composed by ex-police drummer Stuart Copeland, is also really cool. It's catchy enough to retain your interest, but not in your face enough to irritate you while trying to complete a level. My only flaw I found with the presentation really is the fact that the game occasionally lags up. This will happen from time to time when you create such a large, detailed world of Spyro the Dragon on 90s technology, but in this game, it slows down the frame rate and the music, sometimes to a crawl. It's like one of those wind-up music boxes, only in this case you can't wind it back up again, so it's just really annoying. This is only one flaw, but a crippling flaw, seeing as it happens a lot. I don't know if this is fair or not, because this may be caused by it being a digital emulation on PS3, but I can assure you that the PS1 games I've had this problem with on the PS3 are only Spyro 1 and Spyro 2. I've seen this problem also persist on walkthroughs. Anyways, what do you even do in this game? Spyro the Dragon is a simple 3D platformer game, even in terms of the era from which it came from. You move between hub worlds as you progress through the game following a simple plot. You are implored to collect all of the gems in each world by destroying objects, finding treasure chests, and defeating Nork's orcs. And to progress to new worlds, you need to save a bunch of dragons, because the villain, Nasty Nork, who commands these orcs of Nork, turn all of the adult dragons into statues, not thinking that a tiny purple dragon and a dragonfly would pose a real threat. Classic 90s attitude character mistake, villain from 90s game. Psst, side note, I literally just explained the entire plot to you. There's like no other intricacy. I just explained it all. The main gameplay flaw holding Spyro the Dragon back is unfortunately Spyro's moveset, or perhaps the stage design around it, maybe a bit of both. Spyro is armed with Fire Breath, a charging move, and the ability to glide. The simplicity of this is actually fine, and quickly strategizing through set groups of enemies, some only vulnerable to one or two of your attacks, feels really simple yet rewarding. They start this concept off in more simple ways in the earlier worlds. If you've been mainly using the flame attack to this point, then most of the easy grunts that can be taken out by both moves will probably be defeated by the fire. But if an enemy like this is close to a big mama enemy with fire-resistant armor, then killing the smaller enemy just left you wide open to an attack, punishing you into learning the mechanic that you probably could have already figured out on your own. Speaking of being attacked, there's no real life meter in this game per se. Sparx the Dragonfly follows you throughout the game and changes color based on how many times you've been hit. Sparx protects you magically, but if he gets hit 3 times, then Spyro is completely vulnerable, meaning the next hit will cost 1 life. I love this because Sparx has no dialogue or real introduction into the game, but his purpose as the player and his relationship to Spyro are evident because of a simple gameplay mechanic. He's not beeping and booping at me to get a heart. I know it's blasphemy to say this, but Zelda could learn a thing or two here. Oh, sorry, I can feel the rage. So I mentioned that you only have 2 actual attacks. The charge move is of course momentum based, so as you can imagine, bad timing can cost you a life. This is both a good and bad thing. It's good because you can't just go arcade beat 'em ups down to a group of enemies and expect to come out unscathed or even alive in a lot of cases. On the other hand, this could be seen as a big negative because a lot of the places you'll be going in this game have narrow walkways with no real Mario Kart-like guardrail or anything. Half the game's Rainbow Road. Weren't expecting that reference, were you? This really isn't that terrible though, but charging also leaves you open to attacks if you miss. If your timing is off and the character moves out of the way and there's a wall in your face, you're gonna get hit at least once because maneuvering back around is nearly impossible, mostly because of the camera controls. That being said, everything else about the gameplay is amazing. The difficulty curve, the hit detection, the gravity, the glide mechanic, the variety through minigame stages, the collectible treasures and their clever placement in each world, all of these things are done fantastic, but there's one thing I personally find especially interesting and super innovative: the AI. It may sound stupid now, but the artificial intelligence of Spyro was actually kind of revolutionary for its time. Look at most platformers or, well, games in general before this game. Although there were many different smart enemy designs, all of them were programmed on one set path, usually. In Pac-Man, for example, all of the enemies have different movement objectives to go off of, but their main program is strictly to hone in on Pac-Man. Most enemies in games from the 80s and early 90s don't even do that. Whether it was Super Mario Bros., Ninja Gaiden, or even something less retro like Crash Bandicoot, most of the enemies and bosses walk on a set path, essentially ignoring your existence. The closest things to actual reacting enemies in the 80s were really the Boos and Lakitu from Super Mario Bros., and even they just kinda stalked you. The enemies in Spyro the Dragon are doing something else before you come up to them, and then when they see you, they assume an offensive position specific to that character, so even in their 64-bit models, the enemies still almost feel alive. Think about it, if you see a raging moose or something vicious in the woods, it isn't going to walk back and forth on a linear path and wait for you to come and end its philosophical ponderings by jumping on its head. That moose is coming for you, it's going to come and eat your soul at the Moose Brunch Banquet. Because that's probably what it was doing before you came in and ruined his day. Jeez. Jerkwad. Moose aside, if you've been watching my reviews, then you know I have a real soft spot for a game that teaches you how to play from good level design, rather than a giant tutorial babying you through each and every button press. Spyro the Dragon is one of those good games that does good teaching things. Ugh, I really gotta find some more technical terms for these things. The first overworld is a great place to learn to glide, and practicing it rewards you not only with more gems, but a new world to explore with even more gems! I want all of them. Oh, I'm just gonna touch all of them. All of the gems. So beautiful and probably expensive, so it's a good idea to just grab all of them. They're all mine now. The less obvious stuff later is taught the same way, one of my favorites being the Super Flame power-up. Whoa, look at these beetle things. I can't kill them with fire, I can't run into them. What am I supposed to do? They're just gonna kill me. Well, you can either give up and explore the rest of the world, which is completely valid, by the way. You can actually do that. It's not me being sarcastic. Or you can dodge all of their attacks on the way up their cavern if you're feeling a little, extra adventurous. Either path will eventually lead you to the Super Flame Fairy, but you don't know she's a Super Flame Fairy, she's just a fairy that you haven't seen before. She kisses you and then you turn all red, implying that something's different, and it turns you around after you get kissed, kind of pushes you a little bit in that direction, so it's promoting exploration of why glowing red is significant to going that way. Now you can kill the beetles with ease, but only for a limited time, giving you a sense of urgency next time you get the Super Flame ability, which becomes a more challenging power-up to utilize in a later stage, which is why you want to be hasty. Yum! Spyro the Dragon isn't a 60-hour side mission grind fest. Spyro the Dragon is actually a very short game, even for its time. I'm not necessarily sad about this, however. The ending is satisfying, the overall experience is rewarding, challenging, and fun, and the game just shows you what it's made of and then gracefully comes to a close. I think the game is great, it does what it sets out to do with its length, but I still feel like the game is a bit too short. While capturing footage for this game, I was getting 100% completion on almost every world in under 20 minutes each. A lot of them around 10 minutes each. This adds up to a full experience, I guess, but I still feel like you could effectively complete the entire game in just a few hours. I guess I would rather have an exciting, super awesome, short-lived adventure with a game than an overly boring, lengthy one, but I still feel like more worlds or maybe some more overworld secrets would have added to the game overall. Other than the obvious exceptions of Spyro 2 and Spyro the Dragon, there's really no other game like Spyro the Dragon. Having a protagonist in a platformer with no arms to grab or whack enemies with was a huge risk, especially going against the established franchises of Crash Bandicoot and Mario. The game's world as a whole just feels like a magical, breathing place that's always fun to come back and visit. Don't get me wrong, I love the atmospheres of Crash and Mario too, but there's just something so unique about the original Spyro trilogy that no other games at the time had. I think it was just what fantasy games were as a whole. Final Fantasy was a crossbreed between science fiction and medieval, while most other fantasy games up into the 90s were either one or the other. Few fantasy games truly felt like a fantasy to me, and I think the worlds in Spyro the Dragon have that feeling. Spyro the Dragon may not be one of the best platformers of all time, but it was very smart and creative and did things that other games would never dare to do, probably even today. If it wasn't obvious already, I would recommend this game to anyone who is a fan of platformers. If your attention span is a little lower in the sense that you don't want to play through the whole trilogy or sit through dialogue, I would say to give one of the other two games a spin first. Although this isn't necessarily my favorite Spyro game or even one of my favorite games for the original PlayStation, the game is still innovative and just overall designed greatly. This is one of those games that proves that any game, retro or not, is still comparable by today's standards to one degree or another, because Spyro the Dragon still holds up very well.
Wow, I never thought I'd be rescued, especially by such a little dragon. What I mean is, I always believed in you, Spyro.
You gotta believe.
Oh my god!